Yeah, we do. So what I can tell you about that is that we haven't seen a heating effect yet. We see a heating effect on soil CO2 flux. So the amount of carbon dioxide that comes out of the soil it's a result of root and microbial activity, and that's temperature sensitive. We expected that warming would increase CO2 output because that's what you see in all the forest studies that have looked at warming. Warming increases respiration, increases CO2 output. Guess what it does here? Just the opposite in most years. And the reason is that water limitation here is more important than temperature. And warming the soil actually dries it out more, and that's our working hypothesis. It decreases soil moisture, increases water stress, and so here warming actually decreases soil CO2 flux, except in a wet year is the one year we see where it actually increases. So that's it. What that suggests, though, is that forest ecosystems and drier ecosystems, grasslands and deserts, there's going to be some different responses to elevated CO2 in different systems. Let me answer your question about nitrates, though. With respect to the rainfall treatments, that's where we see big increases in nitrate in response to the pulsed rainfall events. The wetting and drying cycles. We use a technique where we bury they're nylon bags with resin beads that collect nitrate and ammonium ions over the course of the whole growing season. We've seen up to, in some years, a threefold increase in nitrate on the resin bags in plots where we have altered the rainfall timing. And I think it's because increased wetting and drying events increase mineralization and the movement of nitrate through the soil profile when it re-wets again.
These heaters go all year?
The heaters do go year-round. Rainfall treatments only during the growing season. The heating treatments are year-round. And if you had stock to invest in Blue Stem Electric, you should probably take it. It's not cheap to run those heaters. Okay. Again, I don't want to spend a lot. So one of the things warming does. So one of the things you might expect is in the spring. One of the things the fire does, by removing the litter layer, you warm the soil, right? And that's one of the reasons that you increase plant growth. Plants get a head start in the growing season. They green up quicker than they do if you don't burn. They green up, so this is a measure of green cover, and the red ones are the warm plots. So plants green up quicker in the spring too when we warm them. And originally we thought, well, gee, maybe that'll increase plant growth. Turns out it doesn't. In fact, when we see an effect of warming on plant growth, it's negative. And it's related to water availability. They have adequate water in the spring, so warmer conditions speed up the phenology. They increase the green up in the spring. But by the middle and end of the growing season, that effect is gone. And in years where we see an effect of heating on productivity, it's not all years, but where we see it, the warm plots, the open bars, actually have lower productivity. Because again, I think warming increases water stress and water limitation.
You have to take all those instruments out of there and kind of burn.
Yes. So the combination of things. So when we burn, the plastic roofs all come down, the gutters all come off, sprinklers are all down, so all that stuff. We have towers that have some air temperature sensors and infrared thermometers. Those all come down. The soil probes that are in the ground and the wells for measuring soil moisture, we can't remove those every year. So what we do instead is we take thick-walled PVC, wrap it with insulation and sheet metal, and they're little fire barriers. And so we cover each of those things in the plots, and then we move them after that. And so everything that we can, we either take out or we protect from the fire, we burn in the spring, and then all that stuff has to go back on. So it's a pretty big operation every spring. And I'll just tell you briefly about where we're at next. We just got new funding from the National Science Foundation for the next phase of this project. So for 15 years, we've been manipulating the climate in a modest way. We've been altering rainfall patterns, slightly increasing temperature, and measuring responses. And so we have a lot of responses we've seen. Some things we thought we would see, like community changes, we haven't seen. I will say there is some evidence, though, that the individual populations may be changing. Because when you look at the genetic composition of big blue stem and Indian grass, for example, one of Mendy Smith's students is doing this. It looks like the genotypes within the altered RaMPS are different. They have different abundances, different relative abundance than the genotypes within the other plots. So it might suggest that we're seeing changes within populations, even though we're not seeing community changes. based on all of that, what we predict is that these 15 years of modest impacts might affect how the prairie will respond to an extreme event. So one of the things we talked about, the extreme droughts, you know, that we had a pretty extreme drought last year, but these multi-year droughts that were very important in historically in the prairie, we haven't seen. Will modest climate changes impact how prairies respond to more extreme events in the future? So our new funding basically is to take what we've done so far and assume that these changes, these modest changes in climate may have altered the prairie template in a way that will influence how it responds now to an extreme event. So we're going to impose an extreme event. The plan is that basically for 2 years, we're going to impose an extreme drought. So we may not have to work very hard if it's like last year. The nice thing is we can actually add water as well as subtract water if we have to under these plots, so we can really control the climate. But the basic idea is to go ahead and impose a drought over 2 years and ask the question, does our previous climate treatments, have those treatments influenced the way the prairie responds to an extreme event? So we'll do 2 years of drought and then a 1-year recovery as part of this new project. And we'll measure a whole suite of ecosystem, population, and community variables in response to that.
Did the current regimen of withholding water and so on, did that change somewhere in the last 15 years? And I thought at one time there was the uncovered, covered, and so on, that there were 3.
There were 4 treatments, yeah.
Four
In the first 3 years, or maybe 4, there were 4 treatments. We actually had another treatment that was just a simple reduction in rainfall, 30% reduction. And then one that was altered timing at a 30% reduction. We did that for the first few years of the project and felt like we already knew what drought does. The more interesting treatment was the altered timing, and in order to increase our sample size from 3 to 6, that's why we changed that. Yeah. So very early in the project, though, it was that way. Then it got modified after the first few years.
Do you still have the two types of covers for the ramps, or is it all just the?
It's all just the clear plastic white kite. Yeah. And the covers are designed to let through as much light as possible. The reality is they do reduce solar inputs, light levels. So when we do our comparisons, we don't compare them to the non-sheltered controls. The non-sheltered controls just allow us to assess the effect of the shelter themselves. The treatment comparisons are all done under the shelter, so we're comparing apples to apples. So that's our current plan for the ramps, and that's a little bit about what we do there. And I'll just show you then, we'll do our virtual field trip to look at some of the other, let's see if I can actually do this.